Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of Pittsburgh Sports Memories podcast, where we look back at the former glories of Pittsburgh sports, including some of our favorite players. As usual, I'm your host, Steve Ward, and I'm with.
I'm Tim Hannon, not you.
Yeah, I know. I wanted to be you so bad, Tim.
I get
I
that a
forgot
lot.
my name. What's my name? Okay, Steve. Yeah, that's right. I'm Steve. You're Tim. All right, we got that straightened for it. But there's no confusion of over whose Hines Ward is. This one I'm going to call the man nobody believed in, Hines Ward. And we're gonna look back at the career of Hines Ward. It's a fun one. He's definitely one of my favorite players, Steeler players of all time. He's definitely a Steeler great, and just one of those I think he would have fit in with the Steelers in any era. And so we'll kind of get into that here. We're not going to go necessarily chronologically. I just kind of have a few little topics that we'll just go through, and we'll kind of just have fun with it. And so just some background, if you were under a rock or just didn't know anything. Hines Ward was born in Seoul, South Korea, and he was of a mixed race. His mother was Korean, his father was African American. And at 2 years old, I think the whole family, father, mother, Hines, all moved to Atlanta, Georgia. And then I think after that, the family separated. His father went to somewhere in Louisiana, and his mother stayed in Georgia. And so after that, Hines went to high school, and in high school, he played quarterback. So that's definitely going to be the position for the rest of his career. Right, Tim? He's
Yeah.
definitely just got to be a quarterback, and that's it. No other positions for him. Uh, Unfortunately, as I guess all of us kind of know, life kind of had other things in mind. He actually must have been a pretty good baseball player because he was drafted by the Florida Marlins to play baseball, but it was like the 73rd round. Why does baseball have so many rounds? You don't. I don't know.
Yeah, that's
I,
pretty far down the list, but I did not know he was actually drafted by a Major League Baseball team. That's an interesting factoid.
yeah, yeah. So he obviously chose to play football at Georgia, and he played wide receiver, running back, and quarterback. And in college, his sophomore year, I want to say, he played quarterback, and he actually won Georgia. He beat Georgia Tech in a game. And he didn't have terrible stats, but I wouldn't say quarterback was definitely his best position. And I think, too, the coach at the time was Ray Goff, and he was kind of in desperate straits. I think he had a lot of injuries that year. Georgia was only 6-5, and beating Georgia Tech. I guess that was 1995, so Georgia Tech was probably still respectable back then. So it wasn't like they had a great season, but he actually played in the Peach Bowl at quarterback, and he did not have a great game. He had a lot of yards, but he threw a lot of interceptions. And so they lost to the University of Virginia. I don't know why they're playing so many ACC teams this year, Tim, but they were. So and actually, another fun fact, what former teammate played on that University of Virginia team, Tim?
It would have been too early for Heath Miller, right?
Yes, way too early. Heath Early was probably like in elementary school or something.
Who
Yeah,
was it?
it was James Ferrier.
Oh, okay.
I don't think he threw an interception to another linebacker, but I don't think it was James Ferrier. That would have been funny if he did. And actually, the Barbers, I think Tiki and Rondé both played on that team. So
Hmm.
there's a fair amount of star power between the two teams. And actually, another fun one I saw in my research was Hines Ward actually, when he played running back, was a running back with Terrell Davis. And I guess they put Terrell Davis and Hines Ward in the backfield at the same time. And it's like, so Hines Ward was like a freshman and Terrell Davis was a sophomore. And of course, they had Terrell Davis at fullback. And I guess Terrell Davis at one point, I want to get some carries. And he told he made Hines Ward as like a freshman play fullback. And Hines Ward weighed like 150 pounds.
Wow.
So maybe that helped him learn some blocking that would definitely become a key part of his career as he went on.
Yes,
So,
that's true.
yeah. Terrell Davis kind of took credit for that. I was watching another podcast with him, but I know Tim. I cheated on our podcast. I'm sorry. The bottom line is, after that sophomore season, Georgia switched coaches to a guy named Jim Donnan, who coached Marshall back to respectability, and the new coach found another quarterback. And as it happens when you switch coaches, maybe he really wasn't loyal to Hines Ward, or maybe he just didn't have a position for him. So Hines Ward ended up not really having a home. He didn't really play much his last 2 years. He really didn't play much at wide receiver. He definitely wasn't a quarterback, and they really didn't use him in any way as a running back. So, and Georgia had a fair amount of success the next 3 seasons. I think they won 4 bowl games in a row and had like 10 wins one year. So it wasn't like they were like in trouble and really needed. I think Hines Ward more started at quarterback that one year out of like necessity more than like, you know, he was better than the other people. So, which leads us to the NFL draft and combine. So, there were a couple teams, I think Indianapolis, and there was another team that was interested in him, and he was expected to go, I think, on the first or second round. But when they did a physical, they found out that he had no ACL. And I hear he had been playing without an ACL in his knee since he was a kid, his whole football career. And that made these other teams go away. Even the Steelers, there were stories that Cower and I think some of the other scouts had to argue with the Steelers medical staff about drafting him. But it actually comes out to benefit the Steelers because they are able to pick him up in the third round. And I remember when they picked him up, they kind of sold him as like a slash, like another Cordell Stewart. Would that been what you remember, Tim? I mean,
They were really into that back then, drafting these
yeah,
like guys like that on offense because they had Cordell and then Hines, and a few years later it was Anton Randall.
yeah.
So it was guys that had played quarterback at one point, and maybe they could play quarterback, but maybe they could play receiver. So you're right. That was the thought, and that third round pick, I think Steve was their second third round pick that year because I think it was one of those supplemental picks because
That sounds right because it says the 92nd pick in the third round. So
right, and back then the Steelers in the '90s always lost a bunch of free agents.
oh, okay. And this was one of those kind of
Yeah,
okay.
and it was one of those. Yeah, their first third round pick was Chris Conrad, an offensive tackle at pick 66. And then Hines was the last guy picked in the third round. So he was like almost a fourth rounder, but that wasn't a real pick. It was like one of those supplemental picks. Like all the teams picked, then they threw an extra pick at the end of the third round for the Steelers because they had lost a bunch of players to free agency.
Yeah, so that's how Hines Ward. Hines Ward, his first year, he played a lot on special teams, and that's where he really thrived. And the Steelers did not have a good season in '99. I think they were switching between Tom Zach and Cordell and Kent Graham, and that was kind of that whole mess that we've gone over in other podcasts. So Hines Ward, like he worked really hard at being a receiver, but he really doesn't have a quality quarterback at that point. So he goes his second year. Actually, I have him leading the Steelers in receiving his second year. His first year, I think he mainly played special teams his first year. And then his second year, he really was their biggest receiver. But once again, the Steelers this kind of starts the whole they don't respect me, nobody believes in me kind of attitude in Hines Ward because just like in college, this team is trying to replace him. And so the Steelers still went ahead after a second year. They drafted Troy Edwards out of Louisiana Tech with a number 13. That was the number 13 selection. I didn't realize Troy Edwards was that high.
Yeah, that was a bad pick.
That was a complete
That
bust.
was a really bad
Yeah.
pick.
It
But
wasn't a complete bust, but it was not. He did not live up. Like, if he would have been a fourth round pick, once again, it's like who's Terrell Edmonds. If he would have been a fourth round pick, you're like, well, it wasn't a great pick, but it's only fourth round. It's like it's a first round pick. He should not be playing special teams to be out of the league in 5 years.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly right. Like Terrell Edmonds was
Yeah.
at least a starter. I mean, Troy Edwards, and then What had happened that year was that they were just dead set. They had to have a wide receiver. That was their biggest need. They wanted to. They were really trying to invest in Cordell. They were trying to invest in. They had a new offensive coordinator in Kevin Gilbride that year, and what had happened was the top two receivers on the board were David Boston and Torrey Holt, and both those guys got picked. And the Steelers didn't seem to have like a plan B. Like none of those guys were available, so they reached for Edwards at 13, and it was a disaster.
Is this pre Kevin Colbert? Is this?
Yeah, this would have been Donahoe's final draft.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
see that's the difference between Colbert and Donahue. Colbert never would have reached.
Correct.
He just would have taken somebody else that was better.
Yes, very good.
Yeah.
Very good point.
Yeah. So then in the next year they took Plexico Burris. That ended up being a good pick. And then in 2008, I don't remember Malcolm Johnson, but I do remember Danny Farmer. And neither of those, Danny Farmer was not good. But once again, I think Danny Farmer was a late round pick, if I remember correctly.
Well,
They had the middle rounds. They added Malcolm Johnson in 99 and Farmer in 2000. So I guess those were all third or fourth round picks.
yeah, they were definitely rebuilding their receiving corps. I mean, they had gone to the Super Bowl with that group of like Ernie Mills, Yancey Thigpen,
Yeah.
Andre Hastings, all those guys. All those guys were gone. And they kept drafting receivers, and they spent two first-round picks, high first-round picks, at 13 and an 8 on receivers. And then they were, like you said, they added more guys in the middle rounds. And I think to your point about Hines and the respect thing, he's like, what about me? I led the team in receiving. Like why are you so desperate to get more receivers when you have, what I think is a pretty good one?
Yeah, I think though he doesn't realize that it does take more than one wide receiver. And I don't know, maybe he never felt that. I never heard him say anything negative about Antoine Randall, but I mean, I think you have to have more than two. I mean, like having a good slot receiver is a good thing.
You need more than two. So if Danny Farmer is the pick in the fourth round or whatever, that's one thing. But when you're taking them in the first round,
Yeah.
I think it's saying he took that as he perceived that at least as a slight to him because if you need depth, fine, but why do you need to take one in the first round?
So bottom line is, in this point of Hines Ward's career, he's languishing on the bench and playing special teams. And Bill Cowher, I found an athletic story where Bill Cowher recounted that Hines kept saying, "Why don't I get a chance?" And then Cowher would respond, "You will get a chance. Be patient. Trust me." And Hines said, "Well, you don't believe me." And Cowher was like, "Yes, I do." And Hines Ward, "Well, why do you keep drafting these guys?" And, not really giving him a chance to, and to his credit, and people like Bettis said this and Cowher said this, he never complained. Besides that, he just went back to work and outworked the Troy Edwards in the 2001 game was playing special teams and Hines Ward was starting. And I just remember like Troy Edwards was such a disappointment. Like he was slow and didn't have good hands. And that was a bad combination for any wide receiver.
And he took that penalty in the championship game.
He did. Yeah. He was kind of a little bit of a head case.
That cost us a touchdown in the championship game against New England. So
yeah,
there was that too.
So yeah, Troy Edwards, wherever he is, was not a very good player. Plexico was though. Besides the bonehead, I think that was too the Plexico spiking the ball when he wasn't down bonehead years. So yeah, you had that going for you. But Danny Farmer, I don't think even made the team, did he? I don't think he made it out of camp. Yeah. Whatever Sunoco Danny Farmer's working in, say hi to him for me.
Oh, poor Danny Farmer.
Yeah. So moving on to another a trait I always thought Hines Ward would possess more than like you would think of any other wide receiver would be toughness. And you don't think of like wide receivers necessarily being tough guys. It's more of like a diva, fancy, like trying to think of like who's a fancy pants wide receiver. Who's a fancy pants wide receiver for 100, Tim? I don't know.
A fancy pants receiver. I mean,
Terrell Owens. I don't know.
yeah. I mean, if the point you're making is that Hines
It's
was
all
more
about me, I guess, guys.
okay. Well, yeah. There's lots of that. I mean, from that era,
yeah.
you had Terrell Owens, you had Chad Johnson, you
Yeah.
had Randy Moss could be a head case. You had a lot of divas, and you used to have them obviously today too.
Well, Hines Ward was not that. So he was definitely in 2009 in an essay article, he was voted the dirtiest player in the NFL. And he was he got, I don't know how this vote worked. He got 11.6% of the vote, and the next person down on the list was Albert Hainsworth at 6%. And then, but to his credit, Joey Porter did tie Albert Hainsworth as the third dirtiest player or the second dirtiest player, I guess, in the NFL. Like, what does that mean? 11%? Does that mean like it was just so split across the board that was the highest they could get? I guess I don't know.
Yeah, it was a players poll, so there's however many players. So it just meant that out of all the everybody had a different opinion, and that makes sense. If it's a players poll, guys in the NFC that play Hines Ward every 4 years probably are going to vote for somebody that they see more often.
Richie Incognito was on that list too, by the way. So fun times. They all rounded out the top 10. We'll have a link to that article there. In 2008, the NFL actually changed their rules because of him. During one of the games against the Bengals, Hines Ward did I don't know, what did you call it, a crackback block? I don't know. He hit Keith Rivers. Keith Rivers was pursuing the play to the sideline and didn't see Hines Ward coming, and he hit him and broke Keith Rivers' jaw. So Paul Brown doesn't like losing money, and since his prized rookie linebacker was hurt for the rest of the season, he went, I'm cheap. So it really wasn't about player safety.
You mean Mike Brown?
Did I say Paul Brown? Yeah, Mike Brown, whatever. Paul Brown's son, Mike. Wow, wow, wow. Paul Brown would have wow too. So
yeah, that game was I was actually at that game at Cincinnati. But we did a road trip to Cincinnati to see that game, and it was a brutal hit. I mean, it was totally legal at the time because it just
Rivers is twice the size of Hines Ward. What are we complaining about?
Well, Rivers just wasn't. He had his head going the opposite direction. He wasn't looking, and Ward got him with a block. And I think that defensive players, they usually didn't expect that kind of stuff from a wide receiver. They were probably more conscious of offensive linemen or tight ends, but not wide receivers. So Rivers was just running to chase whoever our running back was, Willie Parker, whoever, and Ward just caught him, and he was badly hurt. I mean, you said it, Steve, his whole jaw was shattered. So that was a pretty brutal hit.
Yeah, I mean, not that Hines Ward didn't get his too. I mean, he took a lot of hits too. Tim used to do top 10 lists on the other website you had about the Steelers a long time ago. So I think the NFL stole your idea, or maybe they stole it from David Letterman. I don't know.
Yeah, I was going to say top 10 lists probably existed way before either of us.
Yeah. So here, he was number 4 at players you love to hate, and here we'll do a clip of that.
Player you love to hate. Hines Ward.
My kind of guy. Here's a guy that, would knock you out. Definitely he deserves to be on that list.
I saw Hines on. I didn't know why they hate Hines, because he takes cheap shots. All receivers take cheap shots.
Players hated Hines Ward.
What are they doing, cheap shot?
When you talk to them privately, they hated Hines Ward. But if you play with him, you love him. If you play against him, you hate him. He's one of those guys.
Is this show players you love to hate or players that other players love to hate?
In a 2009 Sports Illustrated poll, the number 4 player you love to hate was voted the number 1 dirtiest player.
As a defender, you don't include wide receivers in your mental space. As someone's going to come and knock your block off, and here comes Hines, and he's not going soft. Yeah, he was going cheap shot you. Absolutely.
When you walk past him at 6 foot tall, he didn't look that big. But he played. He was a monster.
You'd knock him down. He'd get back up. He'd smile at you. He'd come back on the next play and then knock you out.
Well, there you go, Tim.
Yeah, so one of the voices in there was Chad Brown, kind of saying what the point I made before, that you're not expecting a receiver to be a guy that hits like that. And
maybe it should be something that George Atkinson from the Raiders really liked them. So I don't.
Yeah, that says a lot. That's not necessarily a good thing. But I mean, it just he played different than other receivers did. He played very physical. A lot of people didn't like that, and then certainly like the getting up and smiling. I mean, that I could see if I'm out there and someone hits me, fine, you got a hit on me, and now you have this like smile on your face. I could see getting a little worked up over that.
Yeah, and a fun thing about that top 10 list, he was number 4, so Tom Brady was only 5 at that time, so he was more hated than Tom Brady. And can you guess who number 1 was, Tim, unless you already saw?
No, I can't.
It would have been one Brett Favre.
Oh, interesting.
And the entire Raiders organization was number 3, so that's fun.
Okay.
Good for them.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, Brett Favre, boy, I didn't realize people hated Brett Favre so much, but I guess it happens, huh?
Yeah, that's not who I would have thought would have been number 1 back then, but sure, whatever.
Also, like another thing, you'll see some of this highlights. You can look it up on a Monday night game in 2007. He hit Ed Reed really hard. He like really crushed Ed Reed, and the thing was the Steelers were like already leading that game by 30 points. So I'm not sure what the point of that was, but hey, he hit Ed Reed.
Well, it was the Steelers and the Ravens. I think that's really the point of it. If that was the safety for the Lions or something, it wouldn't have, but it was the Ravens.
I think too, like in the middle of the play while the play's still going on, like Ed Reed's obviously unconscious and like Ward's like waving to the sidelines already and the play isn't over. So another play that Tim really enjoyed and we discussed on another podcast was the play. He made a play in a playoff against the 2007 Jags, which was a playoff game. And he like drew a pass interference penalty to keep a drive going. Tim thinks he was cheating. I say it's just veteran gamesmanship, but
yeah, I think again, Hines always walked that line between, dirty and whatever you want to call the opposite of that, legal or whatever. And that play was a good example. We talked about that in our Forgotten Stories podcast, so go back and listen. I won't go into it in detail, but basically he grabbed the guy's face mask, and then they called Jacksonville for pass interference, and that not only kept the drive alive, that put the Steelers in the lead late in the fourth quarter and almost won them the game. And Jacksonville came back and kicked the last second field goal, but
which they held Aaron Smith on and did not get called.
There was a missed call on that too. So it did even out.
Karma, yeah.
Right. But I'm just saying that's one of those things where, that players you love to hate. Somebody else said in that clip something about, if he plays for you, you love him. If he plays against you, you hate him. And if Hines Ward would have spent his whole career in Cincinnati, we would have despised Hines Ward, right?
Or Baltimore,
right, or even somebody not in our division.
New England,
yeah. So but we love him because he was a Steeler.
In that game against Jacksonville, he did have 10 catches for 135 yards. So outside of the penalty, I always thought he was a clutch player. He had he had a great 2005 AFC Championship game against the Broncos. He made a tough catch against Champ Bailey. I remember Champ Bailey tipped the ball in the air and then Hines catches it. And it was only like a 5-yard gain, but John Lynch, I mean, this is another time, like, you talk about Hines Ward hitting people, like, John Lynch lined him up and absolutely smoked him in a hit that would be totally illegal now. And the Hines credit, he caught the ball. I remember Tunch Ilkin saying after that catch that Hines was tougher than woodpecker lips. So
that play, I always thought that play, if you wanted to like summarize Hines' whole career in one play, that play was it, because that was early in the game. So Denver, that championship game was at Denver. Yes. Denver's strength that year was they had a really good defense. They had Jake Plummer, they had a game manager quarterback, but they had a great defense. So if you can get a lead, then that's playing to their strength at home. And what happened on that play was Ben threw the pass a little bit short, and Champ Bailey almost ran away with it for a pick six. But Hines basically fought him for that ball and like kind of tipped it to himself. And then as he's doing that, that gave John Lynch time to run over and, like you said, just totally clock him. So he fights, and Champ Bailey and John Lynch were two of the best defensive backs in the league, right, at the time. They're both,
I would say maybe even all time. I mean, they got to be good. I mean, especially Champ Bailey. Champ Bailey is really good.
Right, and Lynch too. So, I mean, you have these two all-world defensive backs. One he fights off the interception for. The other one he takes a hit on that could have made him lose the ball. And that was. I mean, it might have been like, I don't know, Steve, like an 8-yard gain.
It wasn't a long game, but it picked up a first down. I remember that,
and it kept Denver from potentially getting a defensive touchdown or even just a turnover, because again, their defense, that's what they were trying to do, was make splash plays on defense. That's how they were going to win that game. And then he catches a touchdown too in that game. Well, you'll talk about that next, but I just thought that play, if you wanted to sum up his career in one play, I think that was it. Just the grit.
Yeah, and it's like some of his stats I noticed in the play, I always thought he had more than these. Like sometimes he has like big stats, but it seems like in some of the games he had big stats, the Steelers lost. In some of the games where he didn't have as big as stats, the Steelers won, but he made like a key play. Like in that game, I think I see he only has 5 catches for like 59 yards in that Denver game.
Right, but
he catches that touchdown at the half, just killed Denver. That was the game, because that was Bettis scores the touchdown, gets called back, and then Ben throws a pass that he thinks is interception, but Hines catches in the back of the end zone. And that was the end of the Denver Broncos. That ended the Denver Broncos 2005 season, pretty much.
It did, and that's not reflected in the stats. The play where he kept Champ Bailey from getting a pick six, that's not reflected in
like that's literally, I think, a 5-yard completion. I didn't go back, but I know it's not a very long completion, and it's just little plays like that was just great. And then like even the Cincinnati game, I have his stats here. He only has 2 receptions, but he does have a touchdown in that game. Once again, I think teams were keying on him. So like that was, remember Cedric Wilson had great games, and some of the other nondescript guys, like Cedric Wilson had a pretty good game in Denver. He tore who's that, Dominic Foxworth, the guy that's the commentator for ESPN. He ate his lunch. They just had no answer for Cedric Wilson, believe it or not. And even the Indianapolis game, he made a big catch early on like a slant pass. I remember that season. He had a really good playoff, and of course Super Bowl 40. He had a great Super Bowl. He was the MVP of that. I thought early in the game, I remember they were struggling on offense, and they ran like a little end around, and that seemed to kind of jumpstart the offense a little bit. And he also had the game-clutching touchdown, and I will play that video now.
At the 43. Little toss. Here comes a gadget play. Randall L. He can throw. He was a quarterback in college. And he's thrown a touchdown to Hines Ward in the Super Bowl. "43 yards, and sooner or later, they're going to run a gadget."
And you know it's coming in this alumni area that I said is between the 40s, and you know that Randall L. is going to be involved in it. It starts off in a reverse. He comes around, and it becomes a reverse pass, and he throws a perfect pass to Hines Ward. Look at them, they start in a bunch, and then here's Hines Ward coming all the way across the field. Randall L. getting the ball out in front for him. But you know that they're going to do it. You know that Randall L. is going to be the guy, and they're usually going to do it around midfield.
That's like, I guess become an iconic play, huh, Tim? And the situation was, I think the Steelers were leading by a field goal at that point. And they were inside the 40, in between the 40s, like Madden said, and they run a gadget play, and Hines Ward makes a catch on the backup safety for Seattle. It's a nice catch. It's a great throw. Good call. And it's become a play that got us one for the thumb.
Yeah, definitely iconic. And one thing that I even just noticed watching it recently is that if you just watch the play, it looks like he's pretty much wide open, and he ran like this perfect route, and Randall L. hit him in stride. He actually adjusts a couple of times while the ball's in the air. He kind of like zigzags a few times while the ball's in the air. So he actually made a really good job adjusting to where the ball was. I mean, imagine if that play, if that was a perfect call. He was wide open. Ken Winston-Hunt made that call. But imagine if that throw doesn't land, where it lands. So he actually even does a good job adjusting to get to the ball.
And he had dropped a couple passes early in the game. So I think he had one where he was in the end zone and Ben hit him on the fingertips, but he wasn't. I remember in the Super Bowl DVD, he said, I was thinking about my feet instead of just catching the ball. So, I mean, he had a great Super Bowl, and and now there's a 2004 championship game, which was just a heartbreaker. And he had actually 5 catches for 109 yards and a TD, and that was a losing effort. And I couldn't find this anywhere, but I distinctly remember Hines Ward saying after the game that Bill Belichick came up to him and said, if you're ever a free agent, he had designed a defense to stop him, and Hines Ward still had a great day. He said, he would take him on for a second on New England. So you think Hines probably would have been a perfect player. Can you imagine him playing on New England? Oh my goodness. I mean, he would have been the Troy Brown. He just basically would have been a tougher version of Troy Brown, pretty much.
Yes.
I don't know. He's definitely way better than Troy Brown. But
that's high praise, though, coming from Belichick. And that was at the point in his career where he hadn't quite achieved the stardom that he did later. That was before the Super Bowl and everything else. So
yeah, I don't think anybody really outside, NFL hardcore fans or people in Pittsburgh probably really knew much about him. So he did get a ring in Super Bowl 43, but if I remember correctly, he was hurt that game and did not play much. He had 2 catches for 43 yards, though. So,
yeah, I mean, that was really Santonio Holmes' Super Bowl, that second one.
And I believe it or not, I kind of forgot about this. He played in Super Bowl 45, and that was his 3rd Super Bowl against Green Bay. And actually, once again, 7 passes for 78 yards and a touchdown, but the Steelers lost that one. That was more Mike Wallace's Super Bowl. But I think for the most part, just one of the more clutch outside of, and we'll compare him later to some of the other guys, but he's definitely one of the more clutch guys just to ever put on a black and gold uniform. Getting into more like the off the field stuff. After football, that just kind of shows the type of person he is. I think he's one of the let's say selfless players, like all for the team kind of guy, and just puts it all out there. A lot of hustle and just gets the most out of what he has. Like I said, after the 2004 AFC Championship game, I was devastated. That was devastating. I thought the Steelers would never win a Super Bowl after that one. I just thought, that was just such a great team. And then Bettis was going to retire, and Hines goes in and gives this speech, and we'll play it for you now.
Did he tell you that this may be his last go around?
No, I mean, he didn't say it, but I mean, you put it all on the line, and I mean, it's just disappointing. I wanted to win more for him more than anything, because he deserves to be a champion.
Yeah, you can definitely hear the emotion there.
Yeah, and it's a shame that he was that upset. But I think once again it's selfless, because he's not upset that oh, boo-hoo, I didn't win a Super Bowl. It's I really wanted to win one for my teammate, and they'd been on this journey together, and just trying to, win one for your team. And I think even in Rooney's book, I remember he said, a team has to have that brotherhood and that camaraderie. And you can have a good team, but if it doesn't have that, you don't normally win a championship. And I think there's something to that. And heck, Dan Rooney's been at the helm for 5 or 6 Super Bowls, so I'm going to take his word for it. He always had that me against the world mentality. Like I said, the local media kind of got fed up with it, but I just think that's how he motivated himself. And if you got, that annoyed by it, get over yourself. I don't know.
So to me, it was annoying. It was like, at what point? I mean, you're the Super Bowl MVP. You're definitely a household name. Definitely in Pittsburgh, probably in the league. And it's just the constant, like, I'm not respected. It was annoying in the sense of, like, it made you roll your eyes, but not in the sense of, like, to your point, Steve, to me at least, of getting, like, really that upset over. And, like, whatever. I mean, it's roll your eyes, but if that's what he's using to motivate himself, it seems to be working, and it worked for him for, his whole career, really.
Yeah, maybe he would have been more wise to keep that internal and just not put that out in the media. I know the media wants to be every little thing said, especially, back then it was probably easier to keep stuff to yourself. Now it's like, oh my goodness, they want to know what you ate for lunch, Mm-hmm. It's just crazy. So maybe that would have been something that more internally would have been better, but it's what motivated him. And he definitely, I think early in his career, he definitely had a point. People were trying to replace him, and good for him for not. It's a credit to his character and a credit to his person that he was able to, overcome all those odds. After Super Bowl 40, I don't know if I mentioned, like, I guess persons of mixed race are not well accepted in Korean society. That was one of the reasons his mother had moved to the United States. And he went back to South Korea with his mom, and they're both, like, even his mom would have been treated very poorly, and I guess was in the time they lived there. That when they came back, they were treated as heroes. They were like national heroes. How many big time Super Bowl MVPs have come from South Korea? I'm not assuming there's many of those. And so, good for him, and good for him finding his heart to forgive, and for both parties kind of coming together. It was just like a feel good story. It was one of those sports centers on a very special sports center, Tim.
Yeah, no, definitely a good story there.
Yeah. He lives in Georgia, and I always thought it was a funny story. He bought his mom a house, and was like, you don't have to work anymore. And his mom like, nope, going to work. See you tomorrow. I think she worked in a school. It was like a cafeteria stuff. It's just like, it's like such like a mom thing to do. Like, Mom, you don't have to work. Like, I have millions of dollars. Nah, I'm going to work. It's like, but that's just how his mom is, and it's funny. He even had a great kickoff return for the Gotham Knights, even though the stadium blew up around him.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm referencing the Dark Knight movie.
He outran the field collapsing, so it was a pretty good kickoff.
Return. They always said he didn't have speed, but he did that time. He couldn't defuse that bomb with Bane, though, so maybe that's a strike against him. I don't know. But that's, of course, if you want to watch the Dark Knight, that's have at it. He actually went into coaching years later. In 2017, he became an offensive intern for the Steelers, whatever that is. I don't know. Was he getting like Todd Haley like coffee or something? Yeah, I don't know. Picking up the balls and the towels after practice. Like, here you go, Mr. Haley. No, I don't know. I don't know what he was doing. But he moved on to New York Jets and actually was an offensive assistant. He was a Florida Atlantic. I don't know if that was that after the goofball Lane Kiffin was there. I don't know. And then he now is the head coach last season of the San Antonio Brahmas or I don't know. That was an XFL team. Unfortunately, they only went 3-7. So I don't know. Maybe we'll see more of Hines Ward coaching. It would be nice to see him. He was also in the executive for the Alliance of American Football, which is that defunct? That's defunct, isn't it, Tim?
I'm pretty sure, but don't quote me on that. I don't keep track of all the
defunct football leagues.
Yeah.
The USFL and the XFL is back, but I think the Alliance of American, like, how many football leagues do we need? I mean, apparently 2 or 3. So now we'll get into the Hall of Fame case. What is a Hall of Fame case? Is Hines Ward a Hall of Famer, or are there too many Steelers in the Hall of Fame? Because, each team has a quota of only amount of players are allowed to Hall of Fame. You remember that rule? Oh, yeah, that's right, because it doesn't exist. So,
yeah, I mean, he's fighting a couple of things. He's fighting the perception that there's too many Steelers. And he's also fighting being a wide receiver. I mean, there's a lot of, well, you're going to go into this, but there's a lot of wide receivers that are still kind of waiting for the Hall of Fame that were pretty good, including Hines.
Yeah, I'll go into the people that are in the Hall of Fame, and I totally stole this from Ed Bouchette, because Ed Bouchette, I don't know if Ed Bouchette, he was a guy who was in charge of getting Hines Ward into the Hall of Fame. He's like, they pick a writer from each NFL city, and they go into like a little conference with all the other writers every year, and each one presents a case for who they think is worthy to join the Hall of Fame. So this was Ed Bouchette's case, and I found it very convincing. So Michael Irvin is in the Hall of Fame, and his statistics are 750 receptions for 11,904 yards and 65 touchdowns. Andre Reed is in the Hall of Fame, although I remember it took Andre Reed a while. And he had 951 receptions for 13,000 and some yards and 87 touchdowns. That was over 16 seasons. And Art Monk, I always thought Art Monk was better than this, but he played a different era where they maybe didn't throw the ball as much. He only has 940 catches, but he has 12,000 yards and 68 touchdowns. Art Monk's probably more comparable, because I say Art Monk was like a very good possession receiver. So Hines Ward, he caught 1,000 passes for 12,000 yards and 85 touchdowns, and was a Super Bowl MVP, which I'm not. Michael Irvin was never Super Bowl MVP, right?
Neither
was Andre Reed. So,
Andre Reed never won a Super Bowl. Yeah.
They don't give Super Bowl MVP. Well, except for that one time they did, but normally not to the losing team. That's on a Post-Gazette article. We'll post a link to that. I don't know, Tim. How does he fit in? I mean, he's not Randy Moss for sure. Randy Moss was definitely a whole different breed. Larry Fitzgerald is definitely. When's Larry Fitzgerald going to be eligible? When did Larry retire?
Oh, I think 3 more years. Yeah, I think he retired in 21.
I mean, if they don't put him in on the first one, then I think we should all drive to Canton and give somebody a strong worded lecture. I will write a strong worded letter. But I can't see Larry Fitzgerald not getting in on his first try. I didn't even look up his stats. Maybe, like I said, I think he's more comparable to Art Monk, maybe Chris Carter, like a more physical version of those two. But he had good hands. Chris Carter had better hands, but I think Hines Ward definitely made tough contested catches. To his credit, Ward ended his career as the Steelers' leader in receptions, yardage, and TD receptions. So it wasn't like, he beat Stallworth, and Stallworth's in the Hall of Fame. And Stallworth was in the Hall of Fame, as soon as he was eligible, wasn't he?
Well, no, he and Swan had to wait for a while, too. That's what I'm saying about receivers. Yeah. Terrell Owens didn't get in on his first try. I mean, and that was probably more because people just didn't like him, which is a dumb reason.
Well, then he didn't even go. I don't blame him. If they're, I totally love that. He was like, well, if you're going to treat me like that, why would I go somewhere I'm not wanted? So
right,
good for him. It's kind of childish, but at the same time, it's like I kind of like it. I don't know.
Well, and there's so many problems with anytime you have something that's subjective, there's problems. But it has to be subjective, because if you went by stats, like there's a Hall of Fame, I want to say like the LPGA or something. There's a Hall of Fame somewhere that it's purely based on like a numerical achievement, and you could never do that in football because
what left guard? What sacks allowed, pancake blocks?
Right? Even for receivers, you could say like, 1,000 catches or 1,200 catches and this many yards, but that doesn't tell the whole story. And some guys have longer careers and they amass more stats. Some guys have shorter careers and don't amass the stats. Some guys played in eras like Stallworth and Swan where they weren't throwing up the ball every play. And then Hines Ward, I mean, as you said, the Ed Bichette did a good job laying out how his stats are comparable to guys already in the Hall of Fame. But like we talked about with that 2005 AFC Championship game, you just look at a stat sheet. It's like, oh, I see he wasn't really involved in that game very much. Yes, he was. He was key to that game, but you'd never know that by looking at a stat sheet. So you have to have a subjective process. You have to. But unfortunately, when you have a subjective process, then people's biases and things like that play in. So Terrell Owens is a good example. I mean, he absolutely deserved to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, but he's kind of a jerk and people don't like him. So they just, that factored into them not voting for him. And that's, so I don't know how you fix stuff like that, because it has to be subjective, but then people are going to be human and look at things through a lens that might be clouded. I don't know. I think he has a very good case. I think he compares to those guys that are already in, and I think he did way more than just put up stats.
So when did I say he retired? Was it 2011?
Yeah, it was 2011. Yep.
So
that was his last year.
So when is it? I don't know all the rules anymore. Like, there's only so many years you're eligible, right? And then you go into the Veterans Committee, don't you?
Right, and that's probably his best chance of getting in is something like that, like the Veterans Committee, where I think that's more players, ex-players, I think, voting than media guys. So that's probably where he'll get in if he does get in.
Yeah. I mean, which is unfortunate. I mean, like we said, I wouldn't compare, like Larry Fitzgerald couldn't block like Hines Ward could, but Hines Ward didn't necessarily, like Larry Fitzgerald and like Randy Moss to me are like probably two of the best wide receivers to ever play the game. And did Randy Moss ever win a Super Bowl? No.
No, neither of them did. But I mean, Larry did everything possible to win one.
He played on an absolute crap team, unlike Terrell Owens.
He never had a quarterback except for that one.
Kurt Warner, yeah.
Well, as I was saying, except for that one tiny little stretch of 2 years in his career, he never had a quarterback. And when he did, he did everything possible to win a Super Bowl. It wasn't his fault that he, wasn't on the field to play defense. Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know. I like Hines Ward. He's one of my favorite players, so I'm biased. Once again, there's that bias. And I love Larry Fitzgerald. I wish he would have got a ring. I wish he would have come to the Steelers at the end of his career, and we could have got him who's that guy in hockey? Ray Bork got like a lifetime achievement ring at the end of his career.
Yeah.
Look at me, I got a Stanley Cup. But it would have been nice to see him do that. Or Don Beebe was another guy. I always liked Don Beebe, and he kind of got like a lifetime achievement Super Bowl ring at the end with the Packers. And
yeah, you're right though. I think Fitzgerald, Randy Moss, Jerry Rice, those guys are in a different stratosphere.
I'm not even mentioning Jerry Rice. Like, it's just Jerry Rice was like more comparable to Randy Moss, although Randy Moss had like longer arms. I don't know.
Yeah, those guys are in their own. There's definitely a top tier all time wide receivers, and Hines Ward isn't there. But when you compare him, like you said, to Art Monk and guys of that.
Chris Carter. Chris Carter's in the Hall of Fame, isn't he? Yeah.
But he had to wait a while too. So I think there's a case to get him in at some point, but we'll see. I think you can keep making the case though. I really do. I think he has a strong case, and I think if you watched him play and you don't just go by stats, he made a huge difference, and he was part of the Steelers' identity for all those years that they were in 3 Super Bowls and winning 2 of them.
And I know you kind of stole my point a little bit here, but he was definitely one of the best possession wide receivers, blocking wide receivers, made tough catches, made clutch catches. And then there's Antonio Brown, who I guarantee you will be in the Hall of Fame like in his first or second year of eligibility. And I don't care how many people he ticked off, because you know why? Because, I won my fantasy league because I had Antonio Brown. Well, you know what? Give me Hines Ward any day of the week, because I don't care about winning fantasy leagues. I care about seeing the Steelers win Super Bowls. And and I think it's just that plays into what you were saying is like people are like, I think sometimes people think other players like Antonio Brown is a total stats guy. That's all he cared about. He never cared about Super Bowls. He cared about his stats. He got one Super Bowl when he glommed on with Tom Brady. That's it. He was just there as a contributor, not the reason they won the Super Bowl. The reason the Steelers won Super Bowl 40 is because of Hines Ward. And that's why I think I always preferred Hines Ward over Antonio Brown. I know I'm in the minority on that opinion, but maybe not. I don't know. I think Pittsburgh fans, Steeler fans, definitely like a guy like him. I would have loved. Now, here's something I would have loved to see, Tim. How about if Hines, we could have gone back in time, put Hines Ward in the 1970 Steelers against those Raiders teams. I don't think he would have been getting knocked out by George Atkinson, huh?
Yeah, he was definitely a throwback type of player. Yeah.
I mean, him and like they put him instead of Lynn Swann even. Oh my goodness, boy, that would have been fun. Him and Tatum going at it. I mean, it was fun. Him and Ed Reed going at it. Never mind like some of the guys on the Raiders. I mean, that'd have been interesting. And he always that was another thing is Hines Ward always seemed to like get in a scrape of blocking with guys that were way bigger than him, a la Keith Rivers. So that's my case for Hines Ward going to the Hall of Fame. Definitely one of my favorite players, one of my favorite Steelers. Anything to add to our case for Hines Ward here, Tim?
I think just like you said, to me, football, the point of football is to win, right? Is to win a Super Bowl and to win. And I think there's guys that are great players that just aren't winners. You mentioned one of them. There's guys all throughout the history of the league like that just great stats, great players, never won anything and never were capable of carrying a team to win anything. And when you talk about the history of Steelers receivers, I mean, Antonio Brown was maybe the most talented ever.
He broke all of Hines Ward's records. He has all the records. But what I don't care. I don't care that you have the most receptions. You have 0 Super Bowls here. 0. That's what I care about.
He was probably the most talented, but guys like Swann, Stallworth, Hines, even Santonio Holmes, those guys willed the Steelers to championships. And I think in the end, that's really what matters the most, to your point.
Yeah. Well, thank you for tuning in. Check us out on all the usual podcast places. Thanks for tuning in, and we appreciate your support and continue to give us likes, and word of mouth always works too. All right, we'll catch you next time.